Nothing broke, nothing escalated. Something simply went quiet. They didn't fall apart. They didn't ask for help. They just stopped moving internally. And you mistook that for calm. INTJ, INFJ, INFP, and INTP types don't lose control the way people expect. There's no shouting, no visible chaos, no emotional spill. What happens instead is quieter. Control doesn't shatter, it narrows. Thoughts become rigid. Attention collapses inward. Options disappear one by one. Not because they're impossible, but because the mind stops reaching for them. From the outside, the INxx still looks composed. Functional, even distant, but fine. But internally, something has already started locking. Sign 1. Rigid inner narratives. The first sign isn't stress, it's certainty. Not healthy clarity, but brittle certainty. An INxx losing control starts repeating the same internal conclusions. This is how it is. There's no other explanation. I already know how this ends. New data stops entering. Feedback gets filtered out before it's considered. This rigidity feels like stability, but it's actually a narrowing defense. For INFJs and INTJs, it often shows up as a single dominant interpretation that overrides everything else. For INFPs and INTPs, it appears as an internal rule they refuse to question even while suffering under it. Control isn't being held, it's being frozen. Sign 2. Cognitive overload without expression. INxx overload doesn't look busy, it looks still. The mind keeps processing, but there's no output channel left. Thoughts stack, connections multiply, nothing gets released. INFJs may feel responsible for holding emotional systems together until they silently collapse under unspoken pressure. INTJs keep optimizing internally, long past the point where optimization helps. INFPs replay emotional inconsistencies, trying to reconcile values that no longer align. INTPs chase coherence, adding abstraction to solve a problem that needs grounding. The overload doesn't explode, it compresses. And compression feels like control, right until it doesn't. Sign 3. Emotional detachment disguised as objectivity. This is where people get confused. The INxx doesn't become emotional. They become less emotional, flat, distant, analytical. They say things like, "It doesn't matter. I've already processed it. I'm just being realistic." But this isn't resolution. It's emotional bypass. INFJs detach to stop absorbing others. INTJs detach to preserve internal structure. INFPs detach when feelings threaten core identity. INTPs detach when emotions disrupt logical flow. This detachment isn't peace, it's containment. Sign 4. Mental escape becomes the primary refuge. At this stage, reality starts losing priority. The INxx retreats, not physically, but cognitively. Daydreaming increases. Inner worlds become more detailed than external ones. Hypotheticals feel safer than conversations. INFJs imagine future reconciliations that never require present action. INTJs run simulations of outcomes instead of engaging variables. INFPs retreat into meaning, memory, or imagined understanding. INTPs disappear into theories, frameworks, or mental projects with no deadline. This isn't creativity, it's avoidance with structure. Sign 5. Hyper-control over small domains. When control is slipping globally, the INxx compensates locally. They become strict about routines, personal rules, language precision, internal standards, not because these things matter more, but because they're still controllable. INFJs micromanage emotional boundaries. INTJs tighten systems and schedules. INFPs enforce moral or personal rules rigidly. INTPs obsess over correctness, definitions, or logic. It looks disciplined, but it's actually containment behavior. Sign 6. Silent withdrawal, not disconnection. This isn't ghosting, it's fading. The INxx still responds, still shows up, still functions. But the depth is gone. INFJs stop revealing inner states. INTJs stop sharing unfinished thoughts. INFPs stop offering emotional nuance. INTPs stop playing with ideas out loud. They're not gone. They're internally offline. Sign 7. Identity tightening. The final sign isn't collapse. It's over-identification. I'm just this way. This is who I am. I don't do that. Identity becomes a boundary instead of a foundation. INFJs lock into a singular self-image of responsibility or insight. INTJs cling to competence as identity. INFPs reduce themselves to values alone. INTPs collapse identity into intellect. Growth feels dangerous. Change feels like loss. And control, real control, is already gone. Here's the uncomfortable part. INxx types don't lose control because they're weak. They lose it because their dominant functions overperform under pressure. Introverted intuition narrows instead of expands. Introverted feeling hardens instead of adapts. Introverted thinking isolates instead of clarifies. The system doesn't break. It becomes too efficient at protecting itself. And protection, when prolonged, becomes a cage. They didn't lose control loudly. They perfected silence. And by the time anyone noticed, there was nothing left to interrupt.